Welcome back to another Inspyre Bites, and we are at Hampstead Heath. And today is an interesting one because as I was walking down this path here, I was thinking about the Renaissance and the Somali Renaissance era that I was talking about. And I was looking around and doing some research, and I saw that how with the Italian Renaissance, which is the most, I guess, referenced, you had Michelangelo's David, you had Da Vinci, you had the Sistine Chapel, you had all these other kind of things that were present, and then if you go to a certain place you can see it. I was thinking, okay, so what about the Somali arts and the Somali culture? Where was their art form? Because we've been a nomadic group for so long, our art had to be taken with us. Whereas the people in Italy, they were stayed in a certain spot, but with us, we were in different spots, and of course we had cities. However, at heart, we were nomadic, and so our art pieces were things that we could take, things that were useful. For example, our sahans, our vases, our bowls, the clothes that we would wear, the batis, the different dirats, the clothings, the textures, the fabrics.
Sorry, could you say that again?
The way that all of them were interwoven was our art. So then, of course, what we've got to look at is the purpose of art. The purpose of art for Somalis was practical. It was things that we could pick up and take along with us. People in Florentine who were people that were city dwellers, and so their stuff could be kept in a museum. Their purpose of art was to just show imagery and show their visual understanding of the human world, whereas ours was to continue to tell our stories. And then the next point as well, we got to look at the mediums that were available. So obviously for us back in the day, it was wood, leather, fabrics, whereas people of Florence, they had access to marble, they had access to all these other kind of things, and wealthy bankers that would be putting money in to that whole economy and that whole industry. On top of that, the printing press. You know, the reason why half our stories is in proverbs, in poetry, is because of the lack of the printing press. And the printing press was a major thing, because I used to think, why don't Somalis have like mystery novels or like fantasies or those kind of stuff? Well, the truth is that they didn't have the printing press that could store pages and words the same way that a book can. They just had to memorize and tell other people. And when it comes to that, and when that's the only sign that you have, then it's not easy to be coming up with a whole list of Sherlock Holmes riddles and mysteries, because who's got to keep up with all the names and all the places, you know, whereas with a book you can just flick through the pages. But Somalis, we had to keep it simple, we had to keep it light in order for us to be able to take it with us. And then lastly, of course, there was the cultural priorities, where of course in Florence and in Italy, their priorities was like leaving a legacy. Their priorities was like, you know, trying to understand the human world a lot more. So that's why their art took that direction. Whereas the priorities for Somalis wasn't that. The priorities of Somalis was keeping the ancestral ties, keeping the stories close, keeping the legacies of the forefathers memorable and accessible, so that we knew who we were, no matter where in the world we ended up. And so because of that, everything that they did was for that purpose, was for us to remember easily. So which is why their poetry was very, very important, because it was poetry that would help with disputes. It was poetry that could spring up rebellions. It was poetry that could spring up all sorts of things that we needed in order to be able to survive. Whereas in Florence, it wasn't necessarily about survival, it was just more about understanding, visionary excellence. Whereas for us, it was generally to survive. It's like you almost feel, how could you carry art in a certain condition like that? How could you carry art on your back? And that's what our ancestors proved that you can do. You know, in us, we are the continuation of that. Wherever we are in the diaspora, we still continue to make art. And yeah, so those are the little thoughts I had on Inspyre Bites. The idea that despite the lack of technological advances that we didn't have, we embody that art. We are now those stories that our forefathers were trying to tell. In our clothes, in the way we make our homes, in our fashion, in our styles. Everything that we do continues the legacy of the Somali art.